Well, good job getting to this point in our business law class. We've covered a lot of concepts, and this final assignment applies the business law concepts we've been studying to an actual entrepreneurial idea with the startup of Disneyland. So, in the Santa Monica Mountains outside Los Angeles, California, is the Griffith Park Observatory. And in addition to the huge telescope that it's famous for, it also has a carousel with horses that were designed by the famous Charles Loof. And Walt Disney would take his daughters there in the late 1940s. And while they were riding the carousel, he sat on a bench nearby. And it's where he came up with the idea for an amusement park that both young and old people could go together and enjoy together. He then took the idea to his brother Roy because they had been partners in everything they had done up to that point. But Roy rejected the idea of an amusement park since there wasn't one yet out there. He thought it was a high risk, and he reminded Walt that they were greatly in debt and on the brink of bankruptcy if he didn't come up with another hit movie. You would have thought it was easy for Walt to realize his dream since he was already famous worldwide for Mickey Mouse and for the first full-length animated movie that won Oscars in the late 1930s. But here he had been rejected by Roy, his own brother. And then he went to the bank that bankrolled all their movies, and the bank also said no to the idea. So Walt then looked for funding for the seed capital by getting a loan against his Palm Springs home and his life insurance policy, and continued with design of the idea, and included Mickey at this time, and started scoping out property, which he had found in Anaheim. He then started a corporation for the idea using his name, Walt Disney Incorporated, but had to quickly dissolve it because Roy came and had a meeting with him and told him that it was too similar to their Walt Disney Studios name and that he couldn't use it. So he then created WED Enterprises for the idea of Disneyland, but opened it as a personal kind of family corporation. WED, by the way, stands for Walt Elias Disney. And it was at that time that he began assigning his intellectual property rights, such as his name and likeness, to WED. And as he began the design of the park, he retained the rights to the railroad, the monorail, and the steamboat, and then sold those or transferred those to WED Enterprises as well. So he was really adept at using those legal entities and protecting his intellectual property rights at that time. Well, as the idea began to grow, he hit Roy again, and this time Roy came on board. Roy really did like the idea of an amusement park, and now that the idea had grown, the brothers were reunited. And Walt also changed the name from Mickey Mouse Park in the beginning to now naming it Disneyland. So there was now two corporations, the WED Enterprises that Walt had set up as his personal corporation, and now Disneyland Inc., which was owned by Disney Studios to manage the construction and to raise the capital. The money needed to realize the park was $17 million. And it was at this time that Walt finally put the full design of the park on a sketch with an illustrator from Walt Disney Studios named Herb Ryman in 1953 to capture the entire idea so that Roy could have a presentation tool as they began to look for strategic partnerships and sponsorships that were going to be needed to raise the $17 million. Roy first met with CBS, one of the lead networks on TV at that time, and TV was the growing medium in most households at that time in the 1950s. CBS outright rejected the idea, and so Roy set up a meeting with the second biggest network, NBC, but NBC ended up standing Roy up And so with neither of those networks interested, Roy and Walt turned to a third up and coming network, ABC. And ABC um, uh, agreed to give them money in exchange for Walt doing a television show on ABC around Mickey Mouse. And so that was how Mickey Mouse Club came about. Uh, ABC gave them $500,000 cash and $4.5 million in loan. And Walt then began a Mickey Mouse Club show that he also used to advertise Disneyland. And then he entered into some sponsorships, first with Coca-Cola, then with Santa Fe for the railroad, and Western Publishing for the licensing of all the printed materials for Disneyland. Coca-Cola, by the way, is still the exclusive provider of the drinks at the California Disneyland park. So with that, the boys then went to the board of directors for Walt Disney Studios because they needed them on board to agree to the partnerships and the sponsorships. And at that time, 3 directors rejected the idea and ended up resigning. But Walt and Roy were able to lobby the other directors and assert their own control so that they could go ahead and consummate those agreements with those new partners. And they also faced a shareholder lawsuit at that time based on the ultra vires doctrine that you've read about, based on Walt acting outside his scope of his employment with Walt Disney Studios to create this idea and personally profit off of it. Fortunately, the shareholder ended up dropping the suit once the Disney Studios board of directors came on board. And finally, the boys were able to move on with construction, which began in 1954. And so by 1955, Disneyland opens, and the first year alone, they made a $10 million profit. Later down the road, WED Enterprises would sell to Disneyland the rights to the monorail and the railroad and the steamboat for $42 million. The drawing by Walt and Herb Ryman in 1953 would sell at auction for $708,000. And one of the horses from the carousel made by Charles Loof is now in the park. And it's worth noting that in the very beginning, when Disneyland opened, you can see the ticket on the slide. It was only $1 for admission and 50 cents for kids. So as Walt said, if you can dream it, you can do it. So Walt really applied both legal principles and entrepreneurialism to make his dream a reality. This was just a short presentation. So if you want to read the full article, go to waltstream.com. It provides a lot more information on how Walt understood to use and leverage legal entities, how he protected his IP rights, his intellectual property rights, how he was able to fund and raise the capital through those methods that I talked about, and that he was so open to partnerships and sponsorships. This is basically what this assignment is about, is using business law concepts to make your dream a reality. And that's what Walt was able to do. On a final note, the original bench that was there at Griffith Park is now in California Disneyland. And so when you go into the entrance, you can go around to one side, and they have an area dedicated for the very bench that Walt sat on to come up with this idea. So thank you, and good luck on the assignment.